Tensions between Washington and Ankara have entered a volatile new phase one that has little to do with NATO or Gaza and everything to do with Iran. In early November 2025, the United States Commerce Department, acting through its Bureau of Industry and Security, announced the blacklisting of 9 Turkish companies and 1 individual. The move, officials said, was aimed at stopping a network that had been supplying sensitive US-made technology to Iran's defense and aerospace industries. These materials, they warned, were dual-use goods components that could be deployed both for civilian purposes and for the development of missiles and drones. According to Washington, the network operated as a covert pipeline. Turkish registered firms were allegedly acting as middlemen, purchasing American industrial and aviation parts and then re-exporting them to Iran through complex trade routes. Officials described this as part of a pattern in which Turkey had become a backdoor to global markets for Tehran amid long-standing US sanctions. Speaking to reporters, a senior US official explained that the move underscores our commitment to prevent Iran from obtaining technology that supports its destabilizing military programs. US Commerce Department spokesperson, once on Washington's entity list, companies are effectively cut off from US technology and suppliers unless granted a special license, which is rarely approved. In practical terms, the sanction means the firms cannot buy, sell, or even maintain products involving American components without risking severe penalties. The Biden administration had previously used the entity list to punish Chinese and Russian companies. But under President Donald Trump's return to office, the sanctions regime has taken on a new, expansive tone, one that extends responsibility to allies if they're perceived as facilitating Tehran's military recovery. Officials within the National Security Council called this a shift from quiet diplomacy to direct confrontation. The timing of the announcement was deliberate. It came just as Iran deepened its regional partnerships from Lebanon's Hezbollah to Yemen's Houthis, and while Tehran and Moscow expanded drone cooperation for the war in Ukraine. US intelligence reports have repeatedly traced components of Iranian-made Shahed drones to parts originally exported through Turkish or Emirati intermediaries. In the words of one official briefed on the matter, we can't close our eyes when allies' firms become conduits for sanctioned technology. Senior US administration official Turkey's response was swift and defiant. In a statement released on 8 November, the Turkish Foreign Ministry condemned the decision as unjust and unacceptable, vowing to defend national businesses. We view these sanctions as politically motivated and inconsistent with the spirit of alliance, a ministry spokesperson said, warning that Washington's unilateral actions could undermine economic and strategic cooperation between the 2 NATO partners. President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan has long sought to position Turkey as an independent power, balancing ties with the West, Russia and Iran. His government insists that Turkish trade with Iran is lawful and transparent, focused primarily on energy and humanitarian goods exempted under UN rules. Yet Washington's patience, it appears, is wearing thin. The newly sanctioned companies based in Istanbul, Izmir and Ankara are accused of purchasing microelectronics, navigation systems and precision tools used in drone guidance and missile control. These items allegedly reached Iranian defense contractors tied to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC. The Commerce Department's order detailed how these firms allegedly masked transactions through false end-user documentation and layered corporate ownership. Investigators said the network moved through multiple jurisdictions, including Malaysia, Georgia and the United Arab Emirates, before the goods ended up in Iranian facilities. Experts note that this enforcement step carries both legal and symbolic weight. By targeting Turkish companies rather than individuals, Washington signals it is prepared to pressure an entire NATO member's commercial ecosystem if it believes sanctions are being undermined. For Ankara, the decision could not have come at a worse time. Turkey's economy is under severe stress, with annual inflation topping 65% and foreign currency reserves strained. The lira, which traded at 9 to the dollar just a few years ago, now hovers near 48 per dollar, eroding public confidence and investment inflows. Analysts warn that any additional US Trade restrictions, even limited to specific sectors, could deter Western investors already wary of Turkey's economic volatility. This is a warning shot that could scare off the Qoti. Few foreign financiers still active in Turkish manufacturing, said S.A. Kandar, an Istanbul-based economist. Erdoğan's administration is trying to frame the issue as part of a larger pattern of Western pressure. Government-aligned newspapers accused Washington of attempting to discipline Turkey for maintaining commercial ties with sanctioned states. Meanwhile, opposition figures criticised Erdoğan for reckless balancing that risks alienating both East and West. This is not the first time US-Turkey relations have been rattled by Iran sanctions. In 2018, Mehmet Hakan Atilla, a senior executive of Turkey's state-owned Halkbank, was convicted in a US court for helping Iran evade sanctions through complex financial schemes involving gold and oil payments. That episode became a diplomatic flashpoint, with Ankara denouncing the trial as political persecution. The Halkbank affair left deep scars, and its shadow still looms. Many in Washington view the new blacklist as a continuation of that unfinished story, a warning that Ankara's willingness to skirt around sanctions will no longer be tolerated. At the heart of the issue lies Iran's growing influence across multiple conflict zones. From Gaza and Lebanon to Syria and Yemen, Iranian-backed militias continue to assert leverage. Washington argues that technology smuggled through third countries enables this regional reach. According to intelligence briefings cited by Reuters, components sourced from Turkish firms were found in debris of drones used by Russian forces in Ukraine, suggesting a chain that runs from US manufacturers to Turkish intermediaries, onward to Iranian assembly lines, and finally to battlefields thousands of kilometers away. In the Middle East, those same drones have been supplied to Hezbollah and the Houthis, reinforcing Washington's claim that Iran's weapons pipeline poses a global security threat. The Trump administration's renewed push to enforce sanctions against Iran fits into a larger maximum pressure revival. Since returning to office, Trump has vowed to hold every facilitator accountable, including allies. In an address at the White House, he declared countries that profit from helping Iran's war machine will pay a price. Donald Trump, President of the United States. Officials inside the National Security Council described the latest step as part of a new allied compliance strategy, tightening enforcement not only on Iran itself, but on the entire logistical ecosystem that sustains its defense industry. Critics, however, caution that such measures risk alienating key partners. NATO diplomats warn that Turkey, a country controlling access to the Black Sea and hosting US nuclear weapons at Incirlik Air Base, remains too important to be isolated. The relationship is too strategic to be broken, but trust is eroding fast, said a European defense official quoted by Bloomberg. For President Erdoğan, the challenge is formidable. Domestically, he must reassure businesses and voters that Turkey's sovereignty will not be compromised by foreign pressure. Internationally, he must convince Western allies that Ankara remains a reliable NATO member, even as it trades with Russia and Iran. Since the start of 2025, Ankara has deepened energy and infrastructure partnerships with Moscow, buying discounted gas and pursuing joint nuclear projects while also maintaining active trade routes with Tehran. Turkish officials argue that cutting off these ties would devastate the country's energy security. At a rally in Konya last month, Erdoğan reiterated his long-standing position. Turkey will make its own decisions and will not act under external dictates. Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, President of Turkey. Behind closed doors, however, Turkish diplomats are reportedly exploring quiet engagement with Washington to limit the fallout. Sources told Al Jazeera that Ankara may propose a joint verification mechanism to ensure its exports are not diverted to sanctioned entities, a compromise echoing earlier proposals over the Russian S-400 missile system dispute. The dispute cannot be viewed in isolation. It unfolds amid a shifting regional order. Iran is solidifying a bloc with Russia and China, promoting what Tehran calls a multipolar alliance. Turkey, while still a NATO member, is increasingly asserting itself as an independent pole, engaging in the same energy, defense and technology ecosystems Washington seeks to constrain. Meanwhile, US allies in the Gulf, such as the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, are carefully watching how far Washington pushes Ankara, aware that similar scrutiny could fall on their own dealings with Iran. A senior Middle Eastern analyst summarized the situation succinctly. This is no longer just about sanctions, it's about who writes the rules of the global economy. Dr. Leyla Farhadi, geopolitical analyst, following the US announcement, the Turkish lira fell 2% in a single day, and shares in several industrial exporters tumbled on the Istanbul Stock Exchange. The Union of Chambers and Commodity Exchanges of Turkey called for urgent diplomatic dialogue, warning that the blacklist could affect hundreds of legitimate firms reliant on US technology licenses. European capitals also voiced concern. Officials in Brussels said they hope the allies could resolve the dispute through engagement, not escalation. The European External Action Service quietly acknowledged that the issue complicates joint efforts to stabilize global supply chains already disrupted by wars in Ukraine and Gaza. Observers recall that each time US-Turkey relations appear to stabilize, a sanctions-related crisis reopens the wounds. The pattern from the 2018 Help Bank case to the 2020 S-400 dispute and now the 2025 Iran sanctions episode reveals an enduring tension between Turkey's quest for autonomy and Washington's insistence on compliance. Ankara's critics argue that Erdoğan's transactional diplomacy, playing Washington, Moscow and Tehran against one another, has produced diminishing returns. Supporters counter that it reflects Turkey's realist pursuit of sovereignty in a multipolar world. Both sides agree on one thing: the relationship has become too entangled to unwind cleanly. For now, neither side shows signs of backing down. The US Treasury is reportedly preparing additional enforcement measures, possibly targeting logistics providers in Dubai and Baku linked to the same network. Turkish ministries, meanwhile, are reviewing whether to retaliate with legal counter-steps or appeal through the World Trade Organization. Regional analysts believe a temporary de-escalation could emerge if Washington allows a license review process that differentiates between firms knowingly complicit and those merely caught in the web. Still, such diplomacy requires mutual trust, something increasingly scarce. In the words of an Ankara-based foreign policy scholar, Erdoğan's balancing act is reaching its limits. Every step now risks a fall. Professor Hasan Yilmaz, Middle East Institute, Ankara Beyond the Sanctions. The episode underscores the unraveling of traditional Western alliances. As the world tilts toward energy realignments and parallel financial systems, middle powers like Turkey find both opportunity and peril in navigating between competing giants. Iran, though battered by sanctions, continues to expand its regional footprint while Washington tightens the screws on enforcement. Each step Turkey takes toward either camp reverberates across NATO's southern flank. Ultimately, this confrontation is less about individual companies and more about strategic orientation. Will Turkey choose to stay anchored to the Western economic order, or will it drift further into an alternative network where sanctions lose their sting? For the moment, all eyes are on Ankara. Its next move, whether conciliatory or defiant, will define not just the future of US-Turkey relations, but the boundaries of global sanction regimes in a fragmenting world.